Sometimes the richest hearts don't live in mansions, and sometimes the purest kindness comes from those who have nothing at all. This is the story of how a homeless girl made a millionaire cry and changed his life forever. It was a cold winter evening in London. The streets were half empty, the air smelled of rain, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry to get home. Everyone, except a young girl sitting quietly near a coffee shop corner. Her clothes were torn, her shoes were wet, and in her small hands she held a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry but hopeful." Her name was Lily. She was just 16. No family, no home, no comfort, yet somehow her eyes still carried warmth. Every evening, Lily sat by the same coffee shop, smiling at strangers and wishing them a good day. Some ignored her, some dropped a few coins, but most just walked by pretending not to see her. One evening, as she sat shivering in the cold, a black luxury car stopped in front of her. The window rolled down, and inside sat a man in his mid-40s wearing an expensive suit, a gold watch, and a look of emptiness. His name was Edward Turner, one of London's most successful businessmen. People called him the man who never smiled. He had money, fame, and everything people dream of, except peace. Edward had just left an award ceremony where he'd been named Businessman of the Year, but despite all the applause and flashing cameras, his heart felt hollow. He didn't know why. And that night, as he stopped at the traffic light and saw Lily, something inside him paused. Edward got out of the car, surprising his driver. He walked up to Lily and asked softly, "Why are you sitting out here in this cold, young lady?" Lily smiled faintly and said, "Well, sir, I'm just trying to make enough to buy a little bread. It's not so bad once you get used to the wind." Her calmness confused him. He reached into his wallet and handed her a 50-pound note. "Here, get yourself something warm to eat." But Lily looked at the money and then looked at his eyes. She shook her head gently and said, "Sir, that's too much. I just need enough for a sandwich. Maybe you can give the rest to someone who needs it more." Edward blinked in surprise. For the first time in years, someone had refused his money. He asked, "Aren't you the one who needs it most?" Lily smiled again and said, "Maybe, but today I'm okay. There's a lady across the street with 2 kids. She hasn't eaten all day. Maybe she needs it more." Edward turned to look. There really was a woman with 2 kids huddled under a bus stop. Something broke inside him. He felt embarrassed, ashamed even. He'd passed by hundreds of people like her without a thought. And here was a homeless girl, freezing in the cold, still thinking about others. Edward knelt down beside her and said, "Do you always think about others before yourself?" Lily looked at him and whispered, "When you've had nothing for a long time, you learn how precious something can be. If I can share a little kindness, maybe it'll keep someone else warm tonight." Those words hit Edward harder than any award speech ever had. He stood there quietly for a moment, then asked, "Would you like to come inside for some food?" Lily nodded shyly. He took her to the same coffee shop she sat beside every day. When they entered, people stared. The waitress hesitated, but Edward gave her a reassuring nod. And soon they were sitting at a warm corner table, steam rising from 2 cups of hot chocolate. For the first time in years, Edward talked like a real person, not like a businessman. And Lily listened like no one ever had before. She told him about her parents, how her mother had passed away when she was 12, and her father lost his job and home soon after. She'd been living on the streets ever since. Yet, she spoke without bitterness, as if she'd made peace with life's unfairness. She said softly, "Sometimes, God doesn't give us what we want, because He's teaching us to be grateful for what we already have." Edward felt a lump in his throat. All his success, his buildings, his companies suddenly felt small. Then Lily pulled something out of her small bag. It was a tiny paper heart. She handed it to him and said, "I make these from old flyers. I give them to people who look sad. Maybe it'll make your day better." Edward took the little paper heart in his hands, and for the first time in years, tears rolled down his face. He cried right there in the middle of the cafe, not because of pity, but because a homeless girl had reminded him what real wealth looked like. That night, Edward couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Lily, her smile, her kindness, her words. The next morning, he went back to the same spot, but she was gone. No sign of her, only a small paper heart lying near the corner. He picked it up and made a decision that changed countless lives. He started a foundation, Hope in Every Heart. Its mission was to help homeless children find food, education, and shelter. And on every brochure, every building, and every wall of that foundation, there was a small paper heart printed on the corner. Years later, during an interview, a journalist asked Edward, "What made you start this foundation?" He smiled softly and said, "A girl with nothing gave me everything. She reminded me that the value of a heart is not measured by what it owns, but by what it gives." You see, kindness doesn't need wealth. It doesn't need fame or power. It just needs a heart that feels and hands that care. The richest man in the world can still be poor in love, and the poorest girl on the street can still be rich in kindness. So, next time you walk past someone who looks lost, cold, or broken, don't just look away, because maybe that moment is your chance to be someone's miracle. Remember, what you give from the heart never truly leaves you. It finds its way back, sometimes in tears, sometimes in peace, sometimes in purpose.